failure is a good thing. Messing up is a good thing. Things getting tough is a good thing because that's how we learn and how we grow. Like if you think about the Mamba mentality or Elon Musk, like those guys love stress, and the ability to overcome challenges is out of this world.
The Apartment Gurus podcast is brought to you by Greenlight Equity Group, an apartment acquisitions and holdings firm co-founded by Carl York and Tate Siemer, host of this show. We offer you the opportunity to be an owner of cash-flowing, wealth-growing apartments without the headaches of being a landlord. These assets are recession-resistant, risk-mitigated, offer significant tax advantages, and are a great alternative to the stock market. Ready to check it out? Go to www.investwithgreenlight.com today to book a personal consultation with Carl or Tate. Again, that's investwithgreenlight.com. We look forward to meeting you. Welcome to The Apartment Gurus, where twice a week, host Tate Siemer brings you deep dive interviews with the wisest gurus in the apartment investing industry. These experts are sure to create game-changing value and inspiration designed to catapult your business to the next level. Be sure to reach out to Tate at www.investwithgreenlight.com for access to his investor portal and Calendly link. And now, here is Tate Siemer and the Apartment Gurus.
Welcome, everybody, back. Another episode of the Apartment Gurus podcast coming to you. And I always like to hang out with friends on the show. And, sometimes I get to network with people that I don't know as well. And this show has been such a blessing in the way of connecting me with key players in the space. And then there's people that I go back with a long way in the real estate space. And my guest today is Joe Rinderknecht, one of the coolest last names ever, I got to say. It's such a cool Rinderknecht, right? Like, it's awesome.
Right.
Joe and I are both based in Utah and met through the Utah Real Estate Investor Association. It was either that or the Salt Lake RIA, one of the two. I think you and I were involved in both. And my first memory of Joe is him standing up in front of a crowd of 100 people, probably the same cowboy hat that you have on right now. And those of you on YouTube can see it. And talking about Tiny's Tribe, which was a cause that you put together to support a young child, I guess, who was experiencing, I believe it was some health issue, if I'm not wrong. Is that correct?
Was that there in Salt Lake?
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah. So it was actually for 3 different families.
Okay.
We're supporting there. And I believe all 3 of the families that we were supporting had deaths
Okay.
in the family.
Deaths in the family.
A girl that had passed.
Yeah.
One family, a husband that had passed, and then a car full of people that had passed. And so they're supporting them and raising capital to help, make life easy for them.
Yeah. And, I just had Whitney Sewell on recently, who's kind of everybody in the space knows. The listeners, you likely know Whitney and his podcast. And he's got LifeBridge Capital that does a lot of philanthropy in the adoption world and sponsors people adopting kids. Like you guys that do this for the right reasons and have structured into your business models some sort of give back. Honestly, just call on me to be better at what I'm doing and to be more service oriented and more giving. And I like to say that myself and my company at Greenlight, that we are in the service business, and we serve certainly our residents and our customers, and especially our investors in growing wealth and protecting wealth and everything else. But to add the level of purpose and meaning that you've added over the years, and that was like 5-6 years ago, it feels like.
22 is when we had that.
Yeah, so just 3 years ago now, but 3 years ago. But anyway, Joe, first of all, just welcome to the show, man. I don't know why we haven't done this before. It's been way too long, and I can't wait to get the audience caught up on your story and kind of all the things you're up to right now.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Tate. I really appreciate being here. I think you've asked me to be on your show once before when we were working on a couple deals with Colette and all. And
yep.
I think back then I just didn't feel like maybe I was good enough to be on a podcast yet. So I decided, hey, now as good a time as any to push past a comfort zone here. And I do have a lot that I feel like I can add value to listeners. And
Yeah, I mean, you've done some deals, man. You've been doing deals. You know, we were talking before we started recording, 80 units in Missoula. You got another big daddy on the line, it sounds like. So before we get into that, one thing I want to just mention real quick is this idea of like not being good enough, or like imposter syndrome, right? And, you know, for listeners, everybody, I'll say this. I believe every single person on the planet has imposter syndrome at one time or another. And they probably have it on an ongoing basis. Like maybe a Tony Robbins has gotten over his imposter syndrome, but I guarantee you he at one point did have imposter syndrome. I think I had done a 12 unit apartment deal and was in a 20 unit apartment deal when I started this podcast, right? So called the Apartment Guys at the time, but all about apartment investing. But, you know, had only done a couple deals or one deal total, and it was into another one, and they were both small. So, you know, 5 years later, here we are, and listeners just know, number one, that you are in good company if you're experiencing imposter syndrome. And I would say that you are capable of doing this business, but I think the reality is that not everybody is. Likely, if you're listening to this show, that you are at this point. Quick takeaway there at the very beginning of the episode is, if you have imposter syndrome, join the club. We all have it. So Joe, tell us your story, man. Like, especially in the world of kind of real estate, you've been at this a long time. You've done a lot of different types of assets and deals in Utah and outside of Utah. So catch us up to speed, man.
Yeah. I think to, I guess, start off on is kind of talking about the nonprofit and Tiny's Tribe. And because I feel like talking about that, I can talk about the past to now and kind of put it together. And so the reason I started the nonprofit, right, is I was in a really bad car accident back in 2013. It was actually on St. Patrick's Day. I was with my little brother, who's 22 months younger than me, and my grandma. I was sitting passenger, and let's see, I was 21 at the time. My brother was 20. And I don't know if he swerved to miss a deer because we were kind of on a back road, or if he was texting, whatnot, but we swerved, overcorrected. And, you know, make a long story short, because there's a lot of details about that accident, and I'm happy to dive into them more if you'd like. But my brother was ejected from the vehicle. Neither of us had our seatbelts on. He passed away instantly. I went out of the vehicle for a short period of time, and I still remember, like, to this day, I can visualize a car like rolling over like my leg, right? Then my grandma passed away a week later from her injuries, and she was late 80s. So, you know, that kind of can tell you kind of the magnitude of the rolling that we did. When we were driving, we were northbound or southbound. When the car stopped, we were completely on the other side of the road facing north. Right. So we had done some kind of like side over side 180. Anyway, grateful and pretty lucky to be alive from this accident. I have come to believe that everything happens for a reason, and that I was given a second chance. And so that's kind of like why I do what I do, who I am, why I do what I do and who I am today. Is that's been kind of that life changing moment that really flipped it for me.
Yeah.
To give you kind of a past before that, right? I grew up ranching. I grew up doing construction. Everything I had done prior had been in the labor world. At that time, I was going to school to be an X-ray tech. And at that time, I wasn't living for myself. I was living for, you know, what my parents wanted me to do and what others wanted me to do. And, you know, I was always just trying to please people, right? Which is never very healthy. And so, you know, from that accident, the reason, and I think, you know, if other people were to say, dang, you know, if they were to look at that accident and hear the details, you know, it'd be probably pretty hard for people to think like, well, how were you able to bounce back? You lost your best friend, you lost your grandma. Like, I was in the ICU for like 10 days. You know, I wasn't expected to live. I didn't know that until months later. Some people could easily have gone down a very deep, dark path, right?
Yeah.
Turned it around for me, and why I created my nonprofit Tiny's tribe. So Tiny was my little brother Clancy. So my brother Clancy, his nickname was Tiny. And the tribe comes from the community, the people, your tribe. And the reason I believe that I'm here today is because of that tribe, the community that came and helped pay for like my hospital bills, the funeral costs, the life flight for my grandma. And I bet you money I lost sleep for the next couple months just because of the amount of friends, family, and strangers that just showed up at my parents' house to make sure that we were good and that our minds were in the right place, right? So that really helped me have a better look on life and moving forward. And so from that, right, I was back to work so that happened in March. Funny enough, I actually was in another rollover car accident in June. Luckily, nobody died from that. So we were pretty lucky. But, back to work in July, got married in August that same year, and just decided, you know what? My life is mine. I'm going to make my decisions. And so really the core of Tiny's tribe and what we're doing for those families is we help families who have been through some kind of like traumatic incident or accident that resulted in severe injury or death. Right. And there's 5 ways or 4 ways that we help. So first off is money, right? Money is always going to be number one, to help pay for hospital bills or funeral costs or groceries, or, if the main parent, the breadwinner, if you will, is hurt or passed away, like they got to have some kind of support. So capital. And then second one is food, right? A lot of the families that we've helped, we've got a connection through Farm Bureau where the guy was, generously donated like a half a beef to each of these families that we helped, which was amazing, right? Half a beef can fill an entire freezer and hold a family out for a year. And then the third thing we do is like housing. If we're in real estate, so we have contractors and subcontractors and relationships with lumber vendors, and so we've been able to get them involved to go and put a wheelchair ramp. And then the fourth thing, which I think is most important, is the mentality. All of this is in the mind, right? All of those things were helpful when I was recovering, but it's all in the mind. So if we can help people have an optimal look on life, that they can move forward and have something to look forward to, right? That's ultimately the goal, and to help life be as simple as possible and easy as possible while they are going through that time of tragedy, right? So
amazing. Yeah, so much there, dude. But I mean, I have a younger brother that's 18 months younger than me, and can't imagine losing him. And my grandma, same. Both my grandmas have passed. One lived to 100, so I knew her very, very well. But I mean, those losses are kind of unspeakable, I would think, in a lot of ways. So I'm so sorry, brother. And I didn't know it. I didn't know any of that. I just thought you were just a great guy serving other people, and you are that. You're every bit of that. But what a story. And take us from, that moment, that key moment where it became a shift from like trying to please others. I know what it's like at that age, especially, man. You're in school, you're in your early 20s, you're trying to figure out your direction. You've got your whole professional life ahead of you. For me, it was incredibly anxiety laden as far as just trying to figure out what direction I was going in, trying to get that right, quote unquote. I was in the same boat as you. I was not making choices in that area of my life around what I was passionate about, what I loved, what I really wanted to do. And it took me decades, to be honest. I'm 51 now. It took me a long, long time to get to that place of really feeling locked into doing what I love to do and doing it with purpose and meaning and mission. Talk about your transition take us from that moment. You're getting married. What a year, by the way. You get married in August. You're studying as an X-ray tech. Take us from that to a real estate investor and a deal maker.
Yeah. And it was a big year, especially for my parents, right?
My
mom just lost her son and her mom, and they're like, and I want to get married. Luckily, I'd known that, I've been dating the girl for a year and a half now. We were actually broke up at the time, but crazy year for sure.
Yeah.
I would say so even before the accident, like in ranching and construction, my dad taught me the values of entrepreneurship. Like he was a trim carpenter. He'd go do side jobs. And so I always had kind of that entrepreneurial spirit because he and I had started a couple little jobs, but my dad got burned in '08 and had some other like business ventures where he got burned. And so kind of his PTSD, if you will, kind of was pushed onto me to not do business. And so that's where they're like, get a safe, secure job, being an x-ray tech, and then you can rodeo as much as you want, have horses as much as you want, and have a great life. Right. And so I bought into that, even though like my heart's desire was to, be entrepreneurship, be an entrepreneur. And so the shift was when that accident happened, is that my brother Clancy was one of those guys who unapologetically went after whatever he wanted to achieve. Right. And he was kind of a rebel, and just like, my parents, they couldn't get in. They couldn't get through to him at all. But like, I wasn't like that. And so like, I took that attribute as my own after that accident. It's just like, whatever you want and who you want to become, go after that unapologetically. And so I took that trait and decided like, I never went back to another day of medical school after that. I was done. And I actually started going to school at Utah State University. I was actually going to USU. But I had done my associates, so it was easy for me to go right into the world of business. And that's when I started starting these small businesses, built picnic tables. We did a whole bunch of stuff that just absolutely fell flat on its face. And kind of another funny thing, I like to say that, if I was a cat, I only have 6 lives because I started a picnic table business in 14. And at the end of 14, I had a horse come over on me and busted both my hips. And so that killed the business because I was the business. Right.
Yes.
So I think it's a great lesson.
Yeah.
One of my mentors at the entrepreneurship program was a real estate guy. And, my dad growing up had me read Rich Dad Poor Dad, just like, I can't remember the gentleman that you did a podcast with couple episodes ago, but you guys were talking about how pretty much everybody who's been in this has read Rich Dad Poor Dad at some level in their life. And so when I started doing some bird dogging for this mentor up at USU, and that's when I really started getting into it and learning it and realizing that that's kind of where I wanted to be, because I knew construction, so I knew I could do, the renovations. And then in 2015 or 2016 is when I bought my first property, which was a duplex in Logan. House hacked. And, it was kind of interesting because my wife and I bought that house out of necessity more than want, because at the time we were living with her parents who we were also working for as well. So we're working for them, living in their basement, and that was not very healthy, I will say.
Right.
To have familiar when you live with your boss. Yeah, it's not great.
Folks-in-law, your parents-in-law. Yeah. Understood.
Yeah. And we got pregnant while we were living in our basement. So it was just awkward.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah. Yeah. Keep going. This is awesome. Keep going. So you house hacked a duplex in 2016. So 8 years ago, almost 9 years ago now. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And that's really where the journey started. We did that deal, and we're living pretty much for free at that time. With the rent that we were getting, and we leveraged equity in that property to buy a fourplex subject to the mortgage that we made an absolute killing on. We bought that deal in 2017 and just sold that this year. And cumulatively over from cash flow and profit proceeds, my partner and I made $700,000 from one fourplex, which was amazing, right? Power of seller financing and taking over people's mortgages, solving problems, right? And that deal scared the crap out of me because I had no idea how to do it. And one of my mentors at that time, Jeff Rappaport, who I'm sure you know.
Love Jeff. He's been on the show. Yep. He's been a guest.
Jeff has been a staple in my life, even getting started. I did wholesaling for him for a couple of years from like 2015 to 2017 as well. And I remember calling him and saying, "Hey, Jeff, here's this fourplex going to auction tomorrow. What are the chances I can get it postponed?" And he's like, "You got 1% chance, man." He's like, it's 5:00 Tuesday night. The auction is at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Good luck. So my thought process has always been, so you're saying there's a chance.
So you're saying there's a chance.
I took that chance and I got the sale postponed and I made $700K just because I took a 1% chance. I mean, I didn't. I made 350. My partner and I were 50-50 on it. And so
what a beautiful win now. Yeah.
After that, it was just like addicted at that point, right? And I feel like I've been blessed. Most people start with single family and they do, fix and flip, wholesale, whatever. Then they move into multifamily. And for me, all I've ever done and really focused on it is multifamily. This year is the first year that I've invested in any single family transaction. So close to a decade now, right? Like I've just been laser focused on everything multifamily. And there was even a period between so I drove semi from 2015 to 2018 and I did a whole bunch of like learning. In 2018 to 2021, I didn't buy a single deal in that 3-year period because I went to work for a property management company and I worked for a group out of Texas, Obsidian Capital, those guys like David Tube, and I worked with him and, Mike Woodfield and Glenn Gonzalez. I helped them find deals, and then I worked for a group out of Vegas and did underwriting and deal sourcing. And so for pretty much that 3 years, I just looked for the people who were doing what I wanted to do, which was commercial multifamily. And I went to work and learned everything that I could. And then in 2021 is when I bought my next deal, the biggest deal to then, which was a 24 unit, 1951 build that we turned into a 32 unit and also sold that this year.
That's Brigham City, right?
Yeah, that's right. So
Brigham City, Utah. Yep.
Kind of cool trajectory, from buying a duplex in 2016 to, bought a 54 unit this year, under contract to buy an 80 unit that we should close by the end of the year. We're working on that hockey stick.
Well, dude, bring us, there's so many things here and I can't wait to get into it. Bring us full circles to like Missoula and your next deal, like to, get us up to date here, November, end of October, 2024 here.
Yeah. So I'll talk the 2-3 main deals, right? The Brigham City deal was a very, very heavy lift. And I pretty much spent the last 3.5 years of my life, working, at that property,
Dude, you were working, you were demoing, you were swinging hammers, you touch a lot through all that.
Yeah.
I know
you and I.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't making any money during that 3.5 year period. Right. And so that's when, Clet and I started Coho Properties and you and I worked on trying to buy a couple deals. I was just trying to, get money made while we were doing Brigham, but Brigham City was my number one priority because I had family money in that deal. And so, we had bad luck. I learned a lot. I probably got a doctorate in what not to do, what not to do from this deal. Construction being a really big one. So, when construction doesn't go as planned and you're kind of the guy who knows construction and you're 30 minutes away, you show up.
Yeah, man. We call that construction risk. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
So for pretty much, a good amount of that 3.5 years from 21 to, I wasn't there a lot the last 6 months because we were stabilized, but, end of 23, man, 3, 4, 5 days a week, there with Dean Ellis, Christopher Huffman, working running all nighters to be ready for, certificate of occupancy. I'd say that if there was a learning from that, it is like really, really hone in on your construction numbers. Make sure that you've got the right members, the right team to execute. Because I'll be transparent, right? That were sold. I can talk about this. Like, we were way too optimistic, and granted, we were all kind of newer at it. We set an 18-month timeline and $1.5 million budget.
Yep.
And we moved past, we're probably double on both. We're about 3.5 years in, and we deployed 3 million into the construction, bought it for 2, so we're all in 5 million. And, we did have to do an internal capital call. But I think, there's a lot of people who are losing deals right now. They're either 100% of their capital is being wiped out or 60% of their capital is being wiped out. We were luckily able to get 100% return of capital and a small return on capital. Right. So I feel like we won in that instance. And now all of us can have our brain space back. And it was really cool because we closed on Missoula, the 54 unit, September 30th, and we closed Brigham City September. It's like 24th or 25th. So just days before we did Montana. And I had built a lottery rapport and trust with, one of the, with a couple of the investors in the Brigham City deal. And, they saw, and that, like, I'm a kind of guy that I'll do whatever it takes to make it happen. And if it's showing up, and, cumulatively they deployed $850,000 into my Montana deal, on a $2.65 million raise.
Beautiful. Yeah. That says so much right there. Yeah. About the way you treat your investors and communicate with them and everything else. So talk about Missoula, and then, and then, you have one on the line as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So Missoula, it was interesting how it came about. So with LoopNet, right, you can put on like notifications when deals pop up. Yeah. And so what I call my backyard is pretty much from, say, Missoula up to down to like St. George. So kind of all along that I-15 front, Montana, Idaho, Utah. I can get to either end, within 6 hours of driving. So really easy. And I had this deal pop up, and it was like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock one night, and it was for sale for like $126 a unit, 98 vintage. And I'm like, what the heck? And so Levi Allen, who is my partner on that, you may know him. He's bought quite a bit in Salt Lake. He's got about 600 units under management. So he's a little bit bigger than what I am right now, but great business partner. He and I tried buying a deal in Missoula before that sold for like 300 a unit. And so when I saw this deal pop up, I was like, immediately reached out to the broker. And to make a long story short, we submitted an offer within 12 hours. We were a little bit below asking price. So we were first to offer, and with $50K non-refundable day one, because we knew how good of a deal it was. We wanted to be strong from the get-go. We were first to tour, and we actually, it came down to, there was us and a couple other people, and we were like negotiating on a Sunday evening, like a month later, right? And so we had got a verbal commitment from the seller saying, hey, I'm going to give you guys the deal. And then the next day, like, we never heard from our broker, and like, hey, what's going on? Like, we're expecting the worst, right? Like, why? And so we reached out to our broker and said, Adam, like, why haven't we seen the contract? He's like, well, as you guys probably suspected, we got an offer in the middle of the night, and I have to, as a representative of the deal, I have to show it to him. And the offer was 210,000 higher than what we were under contract for. So we were getting it at 6.8 million, which is like 126 a unit. They had offered 710. And these guys are local operators from Missoula. They have a big portfolio there. And so like, we're like, okay, well, we don't want to compete with these guys. And so we just told our broker and said, listen, because he's like, do you guys want to up your offer? And we're like, we're not interested in having a bidding war here. So this guy is selling this property. He built it in 98, right? So it's a one owner. property to go buy a ranch. So I have a ranching background. Levi has a ranching background, and said, you know what? Tell the seller this. Say that, you know what? We grew up learning that your word is your bond. And when you say you're going to do something, you do it, you know? And so we just called him out pretty much and said, listen, we're going to do everything that we say that we're going to do and have thus far. You know, we've showed good intent, and from the very first offer up till now, we've shown that we can perform. And so we kind of called him out on it, and we got word from him like a day later that he's just like, you know what? I like these guys' attitude. I like that they kind of held me to my word, like that they have a ranching background. We'll give them the deal. So, you know, there was like 4 offers above asking price and one 210K higher. And we ended up getting the deal just to, you know, it goes back to kind of just doing what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
You know, and holding people to that as well as holding yourself to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
You know, we were able to execute, and it was a little tight at closing because I had money coming from Brigham to go to Montana, and there was 3-day weekend there in between. And there was like a Verizon crash on Monday, but when we were trying to get all the money, it was about like 15 minutes before 5 o'clock. We got notice that we'd recorded, and we got her. We got her done. And it's pretty amazing because, you know, I don't know how long it's been since, you know, anybody's seen $600, $700 rents across the Western Front here.
Right.
But that's, you know, the average rent was like $735, somewhere along there. And we're majority 2 beds. And we just implemented our rent increase last week for a $350 bump. And it's crazy because we're planning like a 40-50% of the tenants to leave so we can renovate, right? But we had 6 tenants come back and say, hey, we will take the $350 rent increase. And then 4 tenants say, you know, notice to vacate. And we're like, what the heck? Like, more people are taking this rent increase because we can jump the rent to another $300 to a renovated rent level. You know, so,
yeah. So how many units is that one, Joe?
54.
Okay.
Units.
So 54 times 350 is 18,900 times 12. You increased your NOI by 226,800. In Missoula, I'm just going to throw out, let's say a 5.5 cap. 6. What do you think? 6 cap? 5.5?
Yeah, all of our numbers are based off a 6 cap.
Yeah, so let's go 6 cap. So 6% capitalization rate. You increased the value of that property by $3.78 million by increasing rents $350. And you didn't swing a hammer to do that, right?
Nope, not on this deal.
That's the power of scale. And that's not even that big of in the grand scheme of it, it's all relative. But, you know, in the apartment world, that's kind of a small to mid-size property. But those are awesome rent bumps. I mean, it just, I guess it goes to speak of like to what you saw there, right? You saw at the end of the day, it's undermanaged because the rents are so low compared to where they should be. And, I mean, to see those rent bumps available, I'm sure you had some really solid rent comps around to base that off of, right?
Yeah. The rent comps are not even, they're like half a mile away. They're a couple blocks down the road.
Yeah.
You know, if anybody wants to check the property out, it's called North Russell Apartments. The comps are literally a couple blocks down the road. Forget the first one, but the one is like 1,500 Stoddard, and their 3 beds are going for like $1,650 right now for renovated unit. And like our 3 beds are right now are like, or 2 beds are like $1,000.
Yeah, it's tremendous. I mean, even if you guys didn't do anything else, like, I mean, look at that equity increase in that value increase that you created there. If you could just kind of quickly nutshell your newest venture, and then there's a lot I want to just highlight here.
Yeah. So the newest one is a really cool deal too. And I can't remember who I heard it from, but I've always learned that deals are not to be found, deals are to be created. You know, we had a created deal for Montana. Same with this Idaho deal. It's really cool because I've had a personal relationship with the owner for about a decade as well. My dad, who has 2, 3 decades in cabinet making construction, he's been the maintenance supervisor on this property for 12 years. And the owners are, in their late 60s, and the wife manages the office, and they're just ready to go play. Right.
Mhm.
And, Troy, the owner, has been a mentor of mine for quite a while, since I got started. So at least since 2017.
Mhm.
And he had always told my dad and I that if they ever decided to sell, that we would get first right. And this year he came to us and said, "Okay, guys, we're ready to roll." And what's really cool is that, he bought it also from the original developer. So he's been a one owner. It's been a one owner property built in '04. I love just how we're getting, newer assets.
Newer and newer. Yeah, that's it.
1951, man.
Yeah. From Brigham City. Yes. New vintage, guys. That's a rabbit hole. But man, you talk about construction risk and everything else on Brigham City from before, like you avoid a lot of that with new properties. But yeah, keep on. How many units is this one in Idaho?
80.
80 units. Yep. Okay.
Yep. So what, 50%? I mean, it's 50% 1 and 2s pretty much. There's one more 1-bed than 2s. But we were able, because of the relationship that we were able to, sustain here and grow, he gave us a killer seller finance deal.
Sweet.
We're buying it for 10.5, putting 19%, 20% down, so $2 million, 4.5% interest only.
Oh boy,
nice. For the full 5-year term.
So nice.
We're walking into day one property level cash flow, which you can't really find, on a family deal. And the thing that I like the most about it, and I've become more of a really long-term player. Like most of the deals that I want to do now, or I want to have I think a lot of people think in just 3 to 5 year terms. I want to think 10, 20, 30 years down the road, and how decisions now will impact my family and future family. And my dad doesn't have a retirement. So what's really cool is now that I've got this experience, I'm now able to help my parents put a path of retirement. My dad's
so cool, man.
Late 50s. And this year we talked, and he's like, "I have no idea what I'm going to do for retirement." Right. He works literally 3 jobs. And now that we're buying this deal together, he has some path of retirement, because we're going to hold this deal 10 to 20 years at least.
Dude, I love that. I mean, so many layers of meaning there. I want to highlight a few things for listeners here. Tony Robbins says success leaves clues, right? And Joe has obviously had a very successful trajectory with bumps along the way and rough patches and bottlenecks and everything else. And by the way, that's going to happen. You hear people say it always costs twice as much and takes twice as long. That's what happened with Brigham City, right? But I mean, first of all, I don't want to gloss over the house hack, right? And for listeners that may not know what a house hack is, go to Bigger Pockets. Essentially, buying a multi-unit, living in one of them, and living ideally for free or even making money by collecting rents and, having the mortgage paid, and you're not paying anything. That's a house hack. And starting with that, super sound play right out of the gate. You guys did awesome on that. However many years later. But then the other thing that keeps coming up, you've said the word mentor in relationship to 3 or 4 different people now. And I would throw your brother Tiny into this group, right? His ethic about life and the way that he lived really was informing in a huge way to you and how you decided to live your life. That's mentorship, right? And then you had, Jeff Rappaport, who is a gem of a person. I love Jeff, and everybody should look up Jeff Rappaport. His name is spelled Geoff, and he's been on my show, so you can look up that episode. But you mentioned a mentor that helped you with this last deal, right? The Idaho deal, if I'm not mistaken.
He's
probably missing one in there. I feel like I'm missing at least one in there that you mentioned.
I mean, I've surrounded myself with lots of mentors. I mean, I've got a capital raising mentor right now. I've got lots
David
of
Tupin. I mean, that group's great. And that's another highlight that I wanted to mention for listeners. Like, again, if you're looking for clues on how to do this and how to create a pathway forward, like what Joe's created for himself, look for those clues. So what did Joe do? He went to work in the industry, hands-on property management, also bird dogging at certain points in the trajectory, right? Like, meaning going out looking for other people for their deals, getting experience, hands-on experience in the industry, while maybe making a little money, but most importantly, learning, right? Like really like PhD probably level learning of how to do this business. And so, between the mentorship, and not to mention the seller financing, the creativity that you've done there, the relationship play on the Idaho deal, the willingness to literally go to the mat for your investors and make sure that their money is good. And even if it's just returning capital or returning capital with a little bit of a return, like, you were literally pulling out drywall and they're installing sheetrock. And, I just remember I was thinking, dude, and I remember talking to you in a morning meeting, like one time you're like, oh, I've been at this all night. And,
well,
actually, whatever you were doing.
I gotta say, there was one time that I remember jumping on a call with you and Colette in the cellar of that Oklahoma deal.
Yeah.
And I was in the nasty freaking crawl space of the apartment complex running fiber, because we ran high speed fiber to all of the units. And I remember that I was just sitting down there on the call with you guys as I'm running this fiber, because the CenturyLink guys wouldn't get down in there, because it was gross,
Yeah. That was 1951 build.
Yeah.
That's an old property, man. 70 plus years old.
Yeah.
So, Joe, like, where to from here, man? What's next for you? What's the big vision? Because I know you talked about thinking 10, 20, 30 years out. What's that look like?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me right now is, so I'll kind of talk personal and then business. Personally, like, I am the oldest of my siblings. I'm the oldest of my cousins, and on my dad's side, right? And so I've kind of taken this. So we actually just moved up to Idaho. I'm not in Utah anymore. I'm right here next to all my family. And so in my mind, like, I've really looked up to, like, say, the Rockefellers and like John Huntsman, and how they've built kind of their own family office. Rockefellers are a great example of building their own family office.
Right.
And, being able to, loan their own money to their family members to start a business. And that's what I want to create for my family right now. And it's starting with my dad and I buying this apartment deal together. Is I want to be able to help my family, with financial literacy and long-term financial planning. And I want to be able to, like, my cousins all live on the ranch still. And a lot of the time, that's all that they think that they can do, is because that's what they know is ranching. Like, sure. But I had to get out of that thinking, of the generational thinking, and put myself into a new position. So right now, I'm just trying to be more of an example for my siblings and cousins, and really for anybody who's listening to this, that you can go and do something different than what your family's done, what a generational business has been, right? Like, you can go and be who you want to be unapologetically.
Yeah.
Right. And yes, there's going to be what did you call it? The syndrome,
imposter syndrome.
Yeah. There's going to be that imposter syndrome, but just, tell it to go away and go after it, man. So like, that's really kind of the long-term vision of what I'm looking to create here. A generational impact.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I've really been, thinking about that thought process. It's like, really, the decisions that we make today will either affect for the better or worse our, genealogy down the line. And so for me, I'm going to continue to, buy apartment complexes that right now are local to me, Idaho or Montana, Idaho, Utah. And then, I've got my fund of funds as well, where we're, deploying capital into other passive deals. And coming up, we're actually looking at, since a lot of my background is in ranching, we're actually looking at starting to buy some like farm and ranch land with the fund, because I've got so many resources. And again, deals are not found, they're made. And
Right.
the ranchers and farmers, these good old boys like my grandpa still feeds his cows off the back of his truck. There's nothing wrong with that. He enjoys that. He has a personal relationship with the cows. But there's so many ways to make money on a ranch. And so apartments, and learning how to implement a business plan and other income and all these different other ways to make money and to raise capital. Like, I'm going to take all of that knowledge and implement it over here on the ranching side, because there's going to be a lot of value add opportunities on the farm and ranch side with, these baby boomers who will probably be willing to sell or finance, to live the rest of their life.
Right.
Instead of giving the farm or ranch to their kids for them to just sell it. It's just like, it's no fun to do that. Like, these guys have worked their entire lives, to generational ranch, maybe, on this farm, and ranching and farming is not easy. So we're going to work on providing a solution for farmers and ranchers to be able to kind of retain that equity, without it just flying out the door to their kids. So
I love how you bring a lot of what you're doing just full circle back to your family, back to your culture, your heritage, your ranching background. Joe, what is the best way for listeners to reach you, connect with you, learn more about you?
Yeah. So my email is joe@upcfund.com. You can find me Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I've got a website as well, upcfund.com.
What's the very best one? If some is LinkedIn or upcfund.com, one of those?
LinkedIn would probably be the best right now. I'm putting a lot more focus on that than Instagram.
Cool.
So
cool. Yeah. And then just any kind of parting shot. I mean, I think your message is in your story, but any kind of final words for the listeners here?
Yeah, I would say the last thing that I would say is that when you've got a vision and you get these snapshots sometimes of who you want to become and what you want to create, and then you start to give yourself excuses of why you don't do it. I would just give you, just take one step towards that, right? It doesn't, in my mind, I've always like, if you want to talk about analysis paralysis, man, I am that guy, right? But
you've busted through that. You couldn't do what you did without getting through that paralysis. But I hear you, and I think
it's just one step, right? It's like the scriptures say, the Bible says, by small and simple things or great things brought to pass, right? And it's literally that step every single day towards that. And then what I'll tell you is, like you talked about earlier, Tate, is that once you're in it, it's going to get tough. You're going to have challenges thrown at you. And that's a good thing, right? That's good. It's good that you have failures, because it's not great if you take it as a failure, you just quit, you just gave up on yourself. But if you fail and you learn from it and you move forward, that's the true power. So like, I've been trying to, drill into my son, and that like failure is a good thing. Messing up is a good thing. Things getting tough is a good thing, because that's how we learn and how we grow. Like, if you think about the Mamba mentality or Elon Musk, like, those guys love stress. Their capacity for stress and the ability to overcome challenges is out of this world.
Yeah.
Right.
Well said, man. Mamba mentality. I love that you brought that. That's never been brought up on the show before. I love Kobe. I love the Mamba mentality. Dude, this has been insanely cool, Joe. I'm so glad we finally did this. Amazing to hear your story. And listeners, hopefully you just got a ton out of this. And this is just like a great case example for somebody that started probably right where you are, or maybe you're a couple steps into where Joe is. And lots of instructional things here, like, just the mission driven, purpose driven example that Joe set, the level of meaning that he's created at all levels. So Joe, congratulations, man, on everything. You're still a young dude, and at least I'm more like your dad's. It's going to be so fun to see what you create from here, and it's an honor to be your friend and be collaboration with you. And hopefully we connect on something moving forward on a deal, but really appreciate you being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tate. And I've enjoyed, working with you in the past, and your show as well brings a lot of value to the listeners sure grateful.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Gratitude. Love that. Listeners, grateful for you on that. We thank you. We love you, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everybody. This episode of The Apartment Guys is being brought to you by Greenlight Equity Group. Greenlight Equity Group acquires and operates cash-flowing multifamily assets in progressive metropolitan markets such as Salt Lake City, Idaho, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, and Columbus, Ohio. Greenlight targets consistent, solid returns for its investors and a healthy environment for residents by operating high-quality, safe, clean, affordable apartment communities. To learn more about Greenlight and to sign up for the investor list, go to www.glequitygroup.com.
This has been The Apartment Gurus with Tate Siemer. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. To contact Tate, go to www.investwithgreenlight.com for access to his investor portal and Calendly link. He loves to hear from you and thanks you for being a valued listener. Just a reminder that you are the guru. See you on the next episode of The Apartment Gurus.